Hi, it's Ollie here from Faster Health and Fitness, and I want to talk to you today about pain and the central nervous system. So, I want to start it with a story actually about when I went to Ireland for the first time to meet my girlfriend's parents, and we decided that we would go and have a barbecue on the beach with some family and friends and that, and we had a few drinks and all that kind of stuff. And later on in the afternoon, when the sun was setting, my girlfriend's mum stepped on a barbecue tray that was holding all the coals, and she stood on it and screamed that it was really hot, and then she ran into the sea just to put the to soothe the pain. And when we went over to touch the tray, it was actually cold. Like properly cold. And we told her that, and she was like, no, it was hot. I'm telling you, it was hot. So we were like, okay, that's fine. She still to this day says that it was a hot tray, and it wasn't. It was cold. So what we want to know is what happened there. So what really happened was that she used all her senses and her knowledge of that tray from when she saw it on the barbecue, and she used all of those, her eyes, her sense of touch, and the feeling under her foot when she stood on it, and the fact that she knew what it was straight away when she looked down. And that was like oh my god, that was really hot earlier, so that's going to be hot now because it's cooling down. So straight away she decided that was a danger, and when she stood on it, she just got this perception that it was going to cause her problems. So what happened was that she stood on that tray and felt the cold of that tray and thought it was hot because she associated it with being hot. And then the sensory neurons would have worked in the sense that they'd have said, that was hot earlier. Let's send that signal to the brain. So the touch of the skin would have sent that sensation to the brain. The brain would then go, well, have we stepped on something like that before? Have we felt that before? And then would have sent that signal back. So what you're learning here is that what you see in your environment, what you hear, what you touch, what you smell, what you feel, your brain uses that information. So that's sensory feedback. So the reason why we know we like the taste of something is because as soon as that hits the tongue, what you'll get is the neurons will fire with a signal saying, this is what it tastes like. Do I like that? If you don't like it, you'll spit it out, which will be your motor skill will be to open your mouth and physically get rid of it. Or you go, yeah, I like that, and you'll eat it. Similar with this scenario is that the sensory system would have taken in all her surroundings and all her experiences, and would have then sent those to the brain, and it would have basically took information from all of the senses and said, well, this is what we think, and this is what we've experienced in the past. And then it would send that signal saying, right, we want a motor skill that will take your foot off that, and we want to then create more motor skills and sensory information to get you to run into the sea. So when she did that, her bones moved, her muscles would have reacted, her joints would have felt certain feelings to get her to go through those motions. So it's a good little story of figuring out that that was a cold tray. It wasn't a hot tray, but it still got perceived as being hot. And perception is a really crucial part of how we understand pain and how we understand how our nervous system works. So looking into the research, I've found 8 key sort of factors to pain and training someone in pain. And as a personal trainer or a coach, you need to understand how to train people in pain, because you will come across those. One of the parts of the industry that I don't really understand, and that really annoys me a little bit, is the fact that the trainers won't train someone because of an injury or a pain, because they feel like they're not qualified to. But sometimes you'll have to train someone in pain, because you might have a client who's acquired an injury. So somewhere down the line, you can't avoid it. It's gonna crop up in your career somewhere. So I like to think that I could help these people understand how to train someone in pain, so they feel like they're confident enough to take someone on, or help their client that they've got already who's suffering from an injury or a problem. So from the things that I've found from looking into the research, we first of all know that pain is in the brain. It's not in your nerves, it's not in your muscles, it's not in your joints, it's in your brain. It's a neurological response to keeping you out of harm's way. It's keeping you out of danger, basically. So that's one of the first points. The second point, which is crucial for PTs and crucial for coaches, is that if someone has got pain, then and they don't know what it is, and they've had that pain for a while, then I would refer that person on, and I probably would do it straight away as soon as they felt like it was hampering their goal. Then I would send them out to a physiotherapist or a doctor. And then you're doing the right thing then, because us as PTs, we can't detect tumours, we can't detect other health conditions. So it's really important that you do that. And that then gives you more understanding of an injury. So when they come back to you with a diagnosis that they've got patellofemoral knee pain, then you know that you can go away and look at that, and you can judge that yourself. So you can have a little dig deep into what kind of things might help that in your research, and you'll understand whether that injury is chronic or acute. So diagnosis is really important. So we now know that pain is in the brain, but firstly you want to understand that you can't diagnose an injury from someone's pain. So that's the next step. The step after that is to educate your client. Your client needs to be educated by you. That's the reason they're training with you. So you need to ask your client what their goal is. They need to give you a desire. You've got to find their desired goal, and you've got to help them find that if they don't know what that is already. But they've obviously hired you, so they should have some kind of a goal in mind. I then think it's really important, from some of the studies that I've read recently from Body and Mind, that you need to ask questions to the client like, what do you expect to happen? How long do you expect the pain to be there? When do you expect the pain to stop? When do you want to be pain-free? All these questions change the expectation of the client, but that client might have an expectation in place already that you might be able to alter. And from your questions and your interaction with that client, you could come out with a more positive outcome. So you've got to give them feedback, and they've got to give you feedback. So this leads on to expectation and beliefs, and medical backgrounds, and previous experience of pain. And this can help a client decide on the outcome of their pain. You need to be able to educate your client, praise them, tell them that they are good at things that maybe they've been told that they're not good at. So when they get told that they can't do that because that's a bad position to be in, you know that they probably do that every day of their life, but you're going to use some kind of different external focus to get them to do that task. And it could be something as simple as I can't squat, but you know that they sit down at work and they stand up and they sit down. That's all part of it, and you being able to understand their limitations as well. So you're using their expectation of what they can and can't do, their beliefs in what they're not meant to be able to do, or they're not from what they've read on Google, what they're not supposed to do or what they've been told they can't do by somebody. Like, follow those guidelines, but you don't have to, you know that they do that, so you're going to do that because they know they're safe when they do sitting down rather than squatting. And then medical would be like, could be history based, it could be like the reason why they've got knee pain is because they think they should have knee pain because their dad had it at the same age and he had a knee operation. So little things like that can change your client's expectation and beliefs. And then experience. If they had knee pain in the past and it lasted ages, then that could be part of it too. So you've got all these different elements that the client sort of clings on to that you maybe could influence somewhere down the line. My next point is helping the client and their perception and expectation. So you've got to help the client to perceive where they want to be, what they want to achieve. And their expectation might be that they're always going to be in pain, and you've got to try and change that, which is hard because you find that as a personal trainer, a lot of clients who have chronic pain are used to feeling that pain. We've all done it where we get up and we go, oh, have I still got that pain? Oh, yeah, I have still got that pain in my knee. And you check for pain. And that's an expectation. You expect to feel pain. Every time I go downstairs, my knee hurts. So I'm going to expect to feel that pain when I go downstairs. There's an expectation there of an injury. But I think your job as a PT and as a coach, or as any other health professional or sports professional, your job is to get them confident again, get them to be able to do it a different way. Simply going down the stairs on an angle might change the feeling of the pain they get. So you might be able to alter that and change their perception. So that's a real important part of that. The next one is let the client do what they enjoy. Ask them if they like doing stuff. You might have a client who used to play rugby for years, so maybe you'll do catching drills and things like that because they don't like running on a treadmill. I've found myself sometimes that when I go running, my shin will hurt, but when I play hockey, it doesn't. And it sometimes can be with the fact that you don't really enjoy running that much and your brain's saying, just stop now, just don't bother with it. So it could be that. But I also think that getting someone to do an externally focused task like catching a ball in different directions takes away all that fear and it puts it into something positive and something that they enjoy. And I'm not saying, chuck it right over their head if they've got back pain. That's not a very good idea, but you need to find, by using assessments, you'll need to find how that person moves and whether they're able to do that kind of stuff. You could be just walking with a client and passing them a ball, but that's more of a engaging exercise than it is getting them to do a machine exercise or using a dumbbell. They might find that boring, so it is down to the individual. The next point is understand movement. Be able to understand movement and how the body moves, how they change their center of gravity when they move a certain way, because that's the way the brain chose the skill. So their motor skill was to put their foot in that position. It was to move their upper body with their leg, so it made them feel more comfortable. It made some muscles feel short and some feel long, and it might look like to you that you want a different outcome, but you can't understand how you'll get that to change. But with faster, what we tend to do is we tend to get our pupils to understand how to see the body move and how to be able to get eyes that can see movement. So when you see a client compensate in a certain way, you know that when you put one of the arms in the air, that will change the way they move. And that then makes them go, oh, that's quite nice, that movement. So then you use that movement a lot, because then that's a positive movement that they know they can do and they can latch onto that movement. So it's all about finding where they're comfortable and finding where they're safe, because that's your job, to keep the client safe and not put them in that position of pain. So you're always looking to create a positive experience and create a fun and interactive workout. And I've always found that by distracting the client with something they enjoy, you get a really good outcome from that. And some of the psychological studies that I've read have said that as well. Not only in playing games with balls and targets, but even children with disabilities and injuries using computer games. And there's been some studies on chronic like neck pain, using virtual studies to help get pain-free rotation in the neck again. So there's some really interesting stuff on extrinsic focus. So play around with things like that. And with what I'm going to talk to you about at the end, will give you more of an insight in how you do that. The last point that I want to talk about is making a client skillful. How do we skill develop a client? So I talked to you just now about how we look for movements that may look a bit less compensated, and we're looking for a movement that might make that person feel like they're not in pain. So being able to see movements are a really crucial part of that. So we're then working on skill, and skill development is making your client as comfortable in as many environments as possible, in lots of different positions, maybe in a different stance, in a different position of the leg. All these changes with different pieces of equipment will help that client overcome their injury and overcome their pain. So that's a really cool way of looking at it. And I like to use games. Games are a really good way of interacting with a client, creating a trust environment, getting that client to perceive different things, to get them, their expectations will change, because they go, oh, I can't believe I've done that this week, that's brilliant, maybe I will be out of pain before my wedding. All these different perceptions and experiences will help that client overcome their injury, their pain that they've had. Could be that someone's had a disability and not been able to move that well for years, and now they've got up and moved because you've used movements that they enjoyed and movements that they found that they could achieve. So you're being realistic. And I think this is really important, but all the research that I've read on pain seems to steer more towards the expectation and perception of pain, over pain just being a thing. Is that some people will expect to feel pain, or they'll expect that they've got to live with pain, and they'll expect that on every Sunday they wake up with pain, and they'll perceive that as they're always going to be in pain. So I think that the way you talk to a client and the way you engage with a client and the way you use your knowledge and your coaching expertise at managing their intensity and keeping them safe is really, really important as a trainer. So this is why this information's really cool to listen to, because you'll start thinking, yeah, actually I do that with my clients, and I've started doing that with my clients. So I hope this information's been really useful, and I hope to see you on a faster course really soon. And if you want to know any more, you can email me at opearce, Pearce, .pt@gmail.com, and I'll answer any questions that you want to ask, and we can talk about anything that you want to do in the future. Thanks.
In 5 minutes when I'm walking into the gym now to talk about the practical applications of the science that Ollie went through earlier when it comes to understanding and managing pain. Right, as Ollie mentioned earlier, pain is an experience created by the brain as a means of protecting you. So if your body believes that a certain movement's going to hurt it, then you're going to create pain, and it's going to stop you doing that movement. So what I want to talk about today, less talk about, more show you about, is how that pain, changing the way you move and changing the way you exercise, can change what's happening in the brain. I kind of have the idea that if you can control your own body weight, and you can know exactly what you are capable of capable of and aren't capable of, then you're going to be much less hesitant when it comes to moving in the gym. So we're going to go through some exercises, how I can adapt them to change the environment, to change the sequencing, and as a result of changing the sequencing, we'll also change the way the muscles fire, which will change the neurotag in the brain, which may just relieve the pain completely. If it's an injury, it's a different thing, but what we're talking about here is sort of chronic pain, so it's a little bit of trial and error. It's a little bit of task-driven training. So everything that I'm going to teach is done not via squeeze this muscle, squeeze that muscle, but by do something while you're doing this. So it keeps it like a real world situation. All right, made it into the gym where I'm going to have a more practical look now at how different movements can elicit a pain response and then what you can do about them. So I want to start with the first one, which is going to be lunging. And I've had a lot of different people come to me with problems with lunging and how it hurts their knees. So whenever you lunge, you get a pain in the knee. So then you build up this fear response of, I don't lunge when I'm in the gym, so you find an easier alternative, and then you work your way back to the point where you're always finding an easier alternative and you can never really train. The other flip side of that is when you lunge in the real world, like you take a step forward and then go to push yourself back, and then this can start to bring on pain, and then you get worried that you're going to experience pain every day out in the real world, and that becomes a bit of a problem. The usual response is strengthen glutes, release IT band, stretch, activate glutes, activate different muscles. And none of these are quite right because you're taking a tissue approach to a nervous system problem. So one of the first things that I see with people in pain in lunging is that they don't feel in control over the full range of a lunge. So as they step forward, they don't feel they know what they're doing to stop themselves and send them back. So the experience looks a bit like a lunge where you just step forward, come back up. Okay? So textbook form, down, up, okay. So the problem that a lot of people get is on the way forward that the knee travels excessively over the toe. And if you've got the belief that your knee can't travel over your toe, then this might elicit pain whenever you see your knee traveling over your toe. So that's fine. Let's say that's there and it's ingrained deeply and you don't really want to mess with it. So you want to create a lunge where the knee doesn't go over the toe. The easiest way to do that is bring the lunge backwards. So instead of stepping forward into the lunge, you can very easily just go back and down. So if you watch my leg now, my front leg, I can get into a full lunge and my knee never travels forward. If anything, it travels a little bit back. Completely different experience in the nervous system, completely different muscles being used, and a real easy alternative to lunging forward. Then once you create the skills required to stop the body in this position and push back up, you can then start to lunge back and push this way. Step forward, like that. So you're recreating the second part of the lunge, which is pushing back. So then when you go to do this, you've already been there. Another way of changing the lunges a little bit when working with clients is I like to use hand drivers. I like to use hand drivers because I can get a different reaction in the body, in the lower limb, like in the quads and the glutes and the hamstrings and the muscles of the lower leg, without really changing the pattern too much and keeping my clients' focus away from what their knee is doing. So I can use that as a nice way of getting them to lunge without thinking about lunging. So as I change where the reach goes, they get a very different feeling of what muscles are working and what muscles aren't working, if that makes sense. So I can use my arms to increase motion in the hip from the top down rather than from the bottom up. So lunges tend to be very much leg driven exercises. Obviously you're stepping out and stepping back, whereas this allows you to step out, be out there, and then reach through a different direction, creating a different reaction to muscle. So an example of this is, as I step forward, normally most people have hands on their hips or hands by their sides. I'm going to just have the hands nice and loose, and as I step, I don't quite go down as far, but I reach my hands over. Okay? As I do that, I create more flexion at the hip and a greater response from the glute. So if you want to talk about muscle activation, don't squeeze the muscle, create a movement that makes it bigger. Okay? So let's say then that's still not working, client's not happy with that because you're putting all your weight forward onto the heavy onto the front leg where the pain is. So I can get my clients to do a little shoulder press as they step. So you can see how much that limits my knee wanting to move, and it keeps the pressure on the back leg. So then it becomes much more like a split squat rather than a lunge. But you can keep the hands here doing the same thing. You can then rotate and get a different response again. So as I lunge forward, twist, lunge forward, twist, and I get much more glute, much more hamstring. So I can change where most of the feeling is going through, or most of the work being done by the muscle. I can change what muscle's doing most of the work by adding a slightly different reach, which is kind of cool. The thing I want to talk about is back pain and squatting. I'm putting these two together because one of the biggest problems I have with people with back pain is the inability to get down to the ground and pick something up. If you've got pain, then the fear and avoidance of that has probably been built up through negative reinforcement of bending. Well, bending is bad for your back. Okay, so one of the things I like to set out with people when it's taking them through a simple body weight squat progression is a target to reach at. So here I'm just using yellow plates. I set them out roughly in a sort of a semicircle around me. So as I squat and reach, you'll notice that it'll drive different motions in different people. I don't really want to care too much about rules, about heels down. I really want to start to build confidence in getting my body from standing up to down to the ground and able to touch, down to the ground able to touch, twist, twist. Doesn't really matter which way I go. My body can adapt, and I can touch all the different directions. Once I get comfortable with the touching and reaching, then I can start to introduce new rules to limit how much I'm able to move and how much I'm able to move certain things. So the first rule I'd like to introduce is keeping my heels on the ground. So as I squat, you can see already that limits me a lot in how low I can get down and touch the different goals. Then I can limit it so that I got one heel on the ground and I can allow one heel up. So I can keep this heel down, heels up, that allows me to move with a lot more freedom. Neither are wrong, it's just you can see about all the different options I have when it comes to getting down, touching and back. Up. Okay, another rule I'm going to introduce now is I'm going to keep one hand in the air as I squat down and touch. So I just want to keep one hand above my head, squat, touch, back up, squat and touch, back up, touch, back up, touch, back up. Switch hands, down, down, and last one. The next thing I want to play with is the foot position a lot more, so I can put my clients into different positions with their feet so they can experience different movements of accomplishing the same task. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to externally rotate so my toes are pointing out, and then I'm going to squat and touch. You can see this allows me to get my hips down into a fairly deep squat and easily able to touch any the cones. And then back up. Then I'm going to internally rotate them, so try and keep my feet pointed in. And you can see immediately, hips don't like this. And I start to use a lot more from my back. And the end goal of all this is really just to be able to get down to the ground, finding the best position for me, and then to come back up. So the last drill showed me that if I want to get nice and low and keep my back relatively straight or without having to hunch it or use my back, I need to turn my feet out the way. If I do that, I can get down nice and low, I can pick up and use mostly my legs. If I turn my feet in, it's mostly my back. So using these exercises and drills in different ways, I can find out the best ways for me to go down at speed to pick up something light. I can come down with a twist in my back in different ways, and it allows me to experience bending, rotating and tilting without any risk of making anything any worse. And then it also allows me to find the best position when it comes to heavier squatting. If you're watching that, you can see that I like to bring my heels up a lot when I squat, which means when I go into the gym and I start to lift heavier, I know that a heel raise is needed for me to get the strongest squat possible. That's just me, and that's what I've found by doing as many variations of as many different squats as possible. Okay, very quickly. Okay, very quickly before I finish, I want to talk about shoulder pain and basically some simple exercise stuff that can help with it. I've seen quite a few clients with bad shoulders, and I've always found that the more they focus on the shoulder, the less I can help. So what I want to try and do is fix the shoulder to something, and this is where I'm going to use TrueFit. It's just a basic, simple suspension trainer setup. And what I want to try and do is get the client to create the movement in the shoulder by moving the rest of their body. So a lot of the exercise given around rehabbing a shoulder or helping a shoulder move better involves moving the hand, which is very active in the shoulder, and you get the muscles working and pulling the way that they do. And if the shoulder's hurting, they're going to be protective, and they're going to shorten range. They're going to do things that make the shoulder probably feel worse rather than better. So what I want to try and do is create the same motion in the shoulder without them really thinking too much about the shoulder. I'm talking about this in here because the gym might be quite busy, and I don't like talking to the camera in front of everyone else when they're trying to train. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in, I'm going to film myself doing a load of exercises on the TrueFit, and then I'm going to come back out and we're going to have a bit of a chat about what I did, and so you can kind of see it. Cool. Here I am on the first exercise, just using the TrueFit to keep my hands still as I step forward underneath it. This allows me to drive extra shoulder flexion and pull my hands up back behind my head. I then modify the exercise ever so slightly by stepping forward and left, then forward and right, targeting one shoulder a tad more than the other with each step. And then I modify it into a split squat where I go down, and again as I go down it pulls where my hands are placed in the TrueFit. It keeps my shoulder going through an extra range of flexion that I wouldn't get if I didn't have that. Here I'm creating abduction in the shoulder through a few different ranges. We're going in the way then out the way. Again, my hand is still as my body steps around. You can modify lots of different steps to make this slightly different. And you can see just how busy the gym is with a guy squatting in the squat rack, dipping the bar down. But here I am as well, just using that step forward to drive shoulder extension.
I'm James from Master Global. Today we're going to be talking about returning to competition and returning to sports. Post-injury and post-pain, more specifically collision sports like rugby, MMA, football, American football, wrestling and everything in between.
So, collision sports, it's fair to say, can cause a few injuries. There is an element of luck or bad luck to getting them, or previous injury in the area. that can all increase the risk of being injured again. When it comes to pain post-injury, after the tissue's healed, the brain can still play tricks, create the sensation of pain in and around the tissues that were damaged. It's important that when returning to sport, to competition and to collision sports, that we start to produce and carry out task-orientated skill development. It's also very important to note that it's okay to fail during this task-orientated skill development. What we mean by this is, instead of giving the client cues like tense this, or squeeze that, or contract this, we're going to just ask the client to push that, reach here, look there. This will ensure that the client's concentrating on how to complete that task and not sensations going on in the joint at the time. It's important to know that it's absolutely fine to fail these tasks. And by failure we mean losing balance, toppling over, not quite being able to reach. As we fail, the body learns how to adjust and to complete the task as we focus on the task completion itself and not any discomfort or sensation felt throughout the movement. Here we've progressed from balance to hopping as we try and get the client back to sport and back to competition. As progression is seen post-injury, we as trainers and coaches can start to develop the drills we use, making them much closer to the skills that are experienced in a game situation, and a lot less varied as we become more accustomed with the skill in question. In these drills, for example, simple targets to hit focus the client on the task in hand, and not about their previous ACL injury. As the client learns with different foot positions, they learn that performing these movements doesn't cause pain at the previous site of injury. And further progression can be seen as the joint range of motion increases and strength in that range is also observed. Keep varying drills with your clients post-injury, but as you see progress, make the drills and exercises you use much closer to the game situation. This drill is for a winger post-hip flexor tear, looking to get back into running and starting to collide again with different people or objects. Reacting to the stimulus also really starts to make the drill more sport specific. When it comes to collisions again, get the client to experience colliding with an object and also being collided with. The fear from previous injury will go the more pain-free collisions are experienced. Start with simple tasks that don't put your client at risk and slowly introduce more stimuli that the client has to respond to that make it more like a game situation, and potentially being collided with more aggressively like they would also in a game situation. Here we have a great few drills for shoulder or pec injuries. Currently in the industry, most professionals would look at bench press or similar strength exercises for rehab. By throwing the arm into flexion, abduction, external rotation, we are lengthening the pec in 3 planes and then trying to pull the loaded arm back into adduction, extension, and internal rotation. This mimics the movement and muscular contractions of the pec during a tackle. The TRX used here puts more tension on the arm, on the pec, and on the musculature from the offset, making it a slightly different variation, but still very sport specific. All the drills in this video have been recreating collision sports and training tasks in a gym-based environment. And with that said, it's extremely important to expose your clients back to the full immersion of the environmental factors when fully returning to their collision sports.